Okay, now let's see if this works. Hi, everyone. So apparently we just did the world's greatest dry run because technology is not our friend. And oh, look at that. Now we have a clock. Oh my gosh. See, Mr. Dennison thought that he was going to get out of here in a half hour. And so now I owe him and his family dinner.
That's okay. Pizza's coming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Mike Reid. I'm the village president of Hampshire here. And with us, we have Mr. Steve Dennison, who's the vice president of EEI, as Engineering Enterprises, who's our engineering firm. Worked with us for about the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
I want to apologize. We did this whole thing, and at the end of it, it said live up in the box, and we thought we were doing well, and we were wrapping up, and I got some messages going, "Hey, why in the world can't we see this thing?" And I'm going, "It says live right here." I've got video evidence or photographic evidence that was the case.
You should have heard what we said for the last 30 minutes. It was amazing.
Yeah, this is the second time's not going to be as good, but it does show that we were live, and so obviously I need to go back to computer school or something, and that's something coming from the IT guy. But best laid plans. So I apologize for being late. We're going to do this again because we don't necessarily know if our recording is going to be able to be reposted. But we're going to do our best to do it again. I apologize.
Oh, good.
I apologize again. I'm going to say thank you to your wife ahead of time, and I apologize that I'm keeping him another half hour because we had some struggles with technology, but we're going to get this going here. I apologize for the technology problems, but my name is Mike Reid. As I said, this is Steve Dennison. He's from EEI. We recently, within the last month or so, and during the budgeting process and over the last 3 years, have done a lot of homework and have come to the conclusion that it's time that we need to raise water rates. It's an unpopular decision. It's a very, very unpopular decision. We're not happy about it. But the fact of the matter is that the village has some challenges that we need to be able to address. And with that being said, everybody talks about property taxes, and I pay taxes, and I already pay high water rates, and the prices of groceries are going up, and the price to fill your car is going up, and this is going to break us. And so all I can tell you is we understand it. We're in the same boat. The people that voted to raise the water increases, raise the rates and that kind of thing are paying these same rates, and we have the same struggles. And I appreciate that you've given up your time to be with us a little bit this evening to understand to allow us the opportunity to get you to maybe see from our perspective or try to understand the why. I understand we're not going to get everybody to agree with us or be on our side here and understand the impact of this, but we thought that we'd bring in the professionals, and so Mr. Dennison helped us with the utility master plan. He met with us in October.
Yeah, November.
We met with the village board and went through the state of the village, if you will, by the needs of our infrastructure, where we are currently, where we need to go, and what are some of the changes that we need to make to get there. And so with that, I guess I'll ask again, how long or what's your relationship with the village?
Yeah, so I've been working with the village since I started EEI in 2004, so 20 years now. EEI has been around since 1974. We're celebrating our 50th anniversary this year. We've been in the area for quite a while. Started in Elburn, and shortly after that moved to Sugar Grove, which is where our main office is now. We also have offices in Itasca and Rockford. Our backbone has been the Route 47 corridor. Hampshire has been near and dear to us for at least 25 years before I even started at EEI. But I have been personally working on projects with the village since 2004, and that was one of the first projects that I worked on at EEI was expansion of the wastewater treatment facility when I was coming up here and overseeing some of the construction details. And I have continued to work on the major water and sewer infrastructure improvement projects for the village over the last 20 years.
So one of the conversations we have, or we had even 10 minutes ago or 20 minutes ago, which is why now? Why now? I mean, we're already, as we say, we pay property taxes. why do we need to raise rates now? And so one thing that we didn't cover that I meant to cover is that the water and sewer departments operate, as the easiest way I can put it is they operate like individual entities, individual businesses. The money that you pay on your water bill for sewer and water go to fund the operations of those departments directly. They're what are called enterprise funds. And so, like any business, you can't operate at a loss. And so that's why years ago we had to raise the capital development fee from $10 to $20 a month, which was unpopular, which we still hear about, and that's been raised many, many years ago. But what I need to explain is those types of charges go to fund just that capital development within those two departments. That would be investing in infrastructure needs within the village. And we talk about regularly, like painting the water tower as an example. Painting the water tower is a lot more than just picking colors and getting the mildew or the black off the bottom of the tank. Can you kind of explain that process?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. That's infrastructure you can see, and I think we'll talk about infrastructure you can't see, and that's some of the stuff that can be hidden. But for the elevated water storage tanks, those they're steel tanks, and steel, as you know, is going to rust. It's going to corrode. The coating system is meant to be robust, but at some point, that rust is going to break through. The coating system is going to break down. Due to any number of different conditions. And it's not just the outside. That's more the aesthetics is looking at the outside of it. But the inside also needs to be coated. And so there's a lot of evaluation that is done to the steel to see when is the right time to do the recoating, and an evaluation of the right kind of coating system. The surface prep, if it's going to have to be sandblasted all the way down to bare metal. The right surface prep makes all the difference in the world. So there's a lot of work that goes into it, and it's a significant investment. And coating systems have become increasingly more expensive and have really outpaced, along with a lot of other water and sewer infrastructure items, have outpaced normal inflation, even as we've seen it in the last few years.
Now, as we talk about that process, the last water tower that we repainted or rehabbed, I should say, because it's not just painting, was the one over on Elm Street. And it actually became a joke for many around town, especially during that time. I don't know if you know this or not, but Coon Creek Days, who happens to be meeting in our boardroom over here, had our water tower on their shirts, and they always made the joke, how come it didn't have the black mildew on the bottom of it? So when we redid it, we told them that they would have to redesign their shirts to not include that.
Yes.
And so with that being said, a little bit of humor, the cost of that was 2018, I think we decided,
somewhere
in that range.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, the years run together. The cost was between $400,000 and $500,000, and now to do a elevated water storage tank, which we have a few of them in town here, is well over $800,000.
Yeah, and that's just the cost of the way we see things in the construction business right now. Coating systems, anything with steel and concrete, those costs have gone up exorbitantly. We're dealing with it in quite a few other communities right now with bids that have come in on infrastructure projects where your eyes start popping out of your head, but it's the reality of the situation, and we're seeing it here locally. We're seeing it across the United States. It is here to stay, unfortunately. We're hoping that the inflationary impacts settle down. It doesn't get much worse, but it is far outpaced even normal day-to-day things such as groceries.
Now, with that being said, the elevated water storage tank is something that you can see. Let's talk about some of the things you can't see. Now, as an example, let's talk about the 58 miles of water main that we have within the village, a range between the size of 4-inch and 16-inch, and the 45 miles of 6-inch to 36-inch sanitary sewer line that we have within the village.
Yeah, so significant, right? You don't think about it in those terms. I mentioned before what's underground, and you don't really think about that very much, but the water has to get out to every customer in the village, and the sewer has to be collected from every customer in the village, and it has to all be networked together in order to come from and get to where it needs to go. And that's a significant amount of mileage, right? If you think about it in terms of distance between here and downtown Chicago, laid end to end, that's the same distance effectively. So it's a lot of infrastructure. You have a lot of old infrastructure that was built 70, 80 years ago in the downtown area, and that is all reaching the end of its useful life. It is also undersized per current design standards these days. So you have a lot of 4-inch water main where the current industry standard for minimum water main is 8-inch. So that presents some challenges related to flows and pressures throughout the distribution system, particularly when the system is stressed hard in case of a fire event or something of that nature. So these are all factors that come into play. It's replacement of old, aging, failing infrastructure, and also the maintenance of infrastructure that might even be a little bit newer.
Now, with that being said, as we talk about newer, in the early 2000s, there was a big boom. Crown came into town and developed a lot of subdivisions and put a lot of infrastructure into the ground, invested in our water treatment facility and a lot of other things that you can speak to. But the point that you brought up in the last video that no one will ever see, but we can keep referencing, that, you may have just moved into town, and we're happy to have you, and we're happy that you chose Hampshire. And now you're getting notification that you just moved here, you've got all those moving expenses, towel bars and relocation expenses and all that kind of stuff that happens when you buy a new home. And now all of a sudden the water's going up. And you're like, I just moved here.
Right.
Like, why now, you know? And so the point that you brought up, and I'll let you expand on this, is, that infrastructure, a lot of it was put in 20 years ago. And the useful life of a lot of the infrastructure before you start to have problems is about 20 years before you need to start investing again.
Particularly mechanical and electrical components. Now, the pipe that's in the ground, typically lifespan is going to be well over 50 years. You still have to do maintenance to it, but as far as replacement is concerned, that'll typically last a lot longer. But any mechanical component that's seeing normal wear and tear, and electrical as well. And as we know, there's a lot of control mechanisms, instrumentation throughout the systems as well to make everything operate automatically and more efficiently. Those technologies become obsolete and need to be replaced too. So even though it seems like to a lot of folks, just like yesterday, that it went in, it's now reaching the end of its useful life or it's becoming obsolete, and proactive steps have to be taken in order to replace it or rehabilitate it before it critically fails and becomes a much larger problem.
Now we talk about infrastructure that you can't see impacting the infrastructure that you can. I give examples of Terwilliger. It's a fairly long stretch of road within the village here, and everybody always asks, why haven't we just repaved it? All you guys do is rip it up and repatch it. Well, the answer to that question is because the infrastructure underneath the pavement is so aged, we need to replace it. And to do that whole stretch of road and do it the right way is about $1 million. And I also bring up the fact that, a few years back, we used grant money to redo our downtown. And that was about $1 million worth of work in doing so. And the number one comment we got right afterwards is, well, you guys just paved the street and put out some plants and you put the bulb outs and you've got some pylons, but is that really $1 million? Like, there's no way that's $1 million worth of work. Well, there's a lot of money that we put under the street. And that's redoing all the water mains, redoing the electricity, redoing the sewer, making sure the buildings all have proper drainage for their roofs and that kind of thing. And so the comment I always tell people is there's so much that went into the street just so that you can have those pretty sidewalks and that kind of stuff. And respectfully, it's hard for a lot to grasp because you can't see it, right? You turn on your faucet, you think you're always going to get water. You watch the water go down the drain, you just assume that the village is going to deal with it. Fact of the matter is that we have standards that we have to have for clean drinking water, which we test every single day, even on New Year's and Christmas and every other holiday. An employee comes in and checks the water every day to ensure that it's safe. And then at that same end, when the water goes down your drain, we have to treat it to certain standards so that we can stay into compliance with the EPA and the IEPA. And so can you talk a little bit about the wastewater treatment process and some of the equipment that we have there that's aging, and some of the goals that we have or that we should be having as we talk about raising water rates and the impact?
Yeah, it's a good segue. I want to reiterate some things you were just mentioning there about why this is important. So there is the normal standard of care in wanting to provide the best customer service possible to the residents, and that's something that the village is always striving to do. But there's also a regulatory component of things as well. And so regulations are constantly changing. They're constantly becoming more stringent. You might find it hard to believe that deregulation or less stringent regulations are not common in the water and wastewater world. So it's a constant battle to stay on top of those changing regulations and to make sure that the village is well positioned to maintain compliance. Thankfully, due to really diligent work by the staff here, the water and sewer systems have been compliant with all IEPA regulations, and that's to be commended. But it is a challenge to stay on top of, and we might be able to come back and touch on that a little bit later on some other things related to the drinking water side. But on the wastewater side, the wastewater plant has been hit with regulatory requirements related to total phosphorus. So that's, you can Google Gulf hypoxia. So all the water that from the watershed in this area, what leaves the wastewater plant goes to Hampshire Creek, Rock River, Kishwaukee River, all the way down. It eventually gets to the Mississippi and then the Gulf. There's a large national directive right now to control nutrients in watersheds, and the village has had to update some things at the wastewater plant to make sure that you are in compliance with the total phosphorus discharge regulations, and they've done a good job of doing that. But the adventure continues, and there's more upgrades that need to happen. One other thing that we are working on right now is replacing the ultraviolet disinfection system at the wastewater plant. So the water has to be disinfected before it's released to Hampshire Creek, and the existing system is 20 years old, and a lot of those components are obsolete and or failing, and so replacement of the system is required. And it's those sorts of things that can be quite challenging. Yes, the wastewater situation overall is it's a very corrosive environment, and pumps are always going to be failing a little bit more quickly there just because of the nature of the application. And that's I would invite folks, if you haven't already. I know there was an open house recently down at the wastewater plant, but if you're at all interested in seeing everything that goes into it, I think you would be surprised as far as the technology, the equipment, and the level, the magnitude and the level of operation has to happen to make everything work properly in order to maintain compliance with IEPA regulations.
If anybody is interested in coming to visit, let us know. We're happy to show you around. If you're not so eager to jump into our wastewater treatment plant and come to visit, during COVID, Trustee Kelly and myself did an around town video highlighting some of our systems. So if you go to our YouTube page, there's a around the town video showcasing where all of the stuff goes before it goes out into the creek. And so it's down, I'm not going to describe it, but it's down into a big pit in the ground, and it doesn't smell like roses, I can tell you. And so I would like to take an opportunity to recognize Public Works. It is National Public Works, guys.
Yeah.
National Public Works Week.
Yeah.
And we have a great water department, sewer department, and streets department, and they give their all the time. And so we thought we'd certainly recognize. I do, again, want to apologize for those that have tuned in or are tuning in now and said, what the heck, you guys start at 7 o'clock. Long story short, I need to learn how to Facebook Live again, I suppose, because even though it said live, we were not live. And so Mr. Dennison and I did a great meeting that no one will ever see. That being said, we have a page on our website, right on the home page, that is our FAQ. And it addresses a lot of the questions that from staff that we thought of during this process from elected officials. And we continually update this page with residents' questions that are emailed to utilitiesmasterplans@hampshireil.org. Utilitymasterplan@hampshireil.org. It's a living, breathing document. And so, again, we're not in this, and we're not continually meeting and doing videos and all of this to try to get everybody to agree with our decision. We know that that's impossible, but we need people to understand the why. If you would have told me years ago that this is what we'd be doing 3 years into it, I'd say you're nuts. There's no way in the world. But at the end of the day, we need to do the right thing for our residents now, and we need to do the right thing for our residents in the future, and we need to do the right things for people that haven't even moved here yet, that will eventually move here. Um, I wanted to give you that break, but you wanted to talk more about some of the water delivery side of things.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. Speaking of regulations, there's some things that have come in the news recently that folks may have seen related to lead service lines, related to PFAS, to be perfluoroalkyl substances. That seems to be all around us these days. So the lead service lines, there has been some regulatory guidance and direction, and the village has been diligently working through that, working very hard to inventory all the water service line materials that are in the village. And so many of you in the village, even some who may be on this right now, may have responded to a survey, and we greatly appreciate that. That was a very worthwhile effort. They were able to gather information they needed to develop a plan for replacing lead service lines, and that implementation is going to be required starting in the year 2027. Thankfully, there have not been a significant amount of lead service lines identified, but it is still a statewide initiative and requirement for those lead service lines to start being replaced in 2027. And then the other thing with PFAS, in case you're curious about that, and there's any number of websites, there's some websites that you can look up some PFAS sampling results that were done even for the wells here in Hampshire. But because they're deep wells and the aquifers are well protected from surface influence, there isn't any PFAS in your drinking water wells, and it's not something you have to worry about on the drinking water side of things. So I wanted to make sure that I covered those.
We also want to make sure that, I mean, we've had some viewers come and go. If you have a question, post a comment. We'll do our best to answer it. If you're not comfortable asking a question publicly, if you will, please again email utilitymasterplan@hampshireil.org, and we will do our best to get it answered. And if it's a question that hasn't been asked before, we will post it on our FAQ page, because several residents also would probably have that same question. As we talk about some of the things that we do know. We do know that the average user in the village here, average home, uses about 11,000 gallons a month, a billing cycle, I should say. And so we know that the average price per month is going up about $19.83. So it's about $20 a month. I'm not going to lie to you and say, oh, okay, it's less than a month, or it's less than $20 a month. Technically it is, but I mean, it's some change, right? So it's about $20 a month if you use 11,000 gallons, right? So if you use less than 1,000 gallons, the increases average out to be much less, right? The other thing we want to do is encourage you, if you're over 65, there's a program. There's a program within the village here that reduces the garbage rates for senior citizens. So if you're not currently taking advantage of that, you should, and you can do so by contacting the clerk here at Village Hall, and she'd be more than happy to help you out. So we do have a question: will this help water pressure?
I think I should probably answer that question.
Absolutely.
Unless you want to, Mike.
No, I take stab at it, but I got the pro right here.
So actually, as part of this study, and after this question, I'd like to take a step back and just talk about the process of this study. But one of the components was a water model. So it's a computer-aided modeling program that uses inputs that we have related to the wells and the water treatment plants, the elevated water storage tank, all of the water main with their sizes throughout the entire distribution system. And we run different scenarios and do analyses of the water system under different conditions to see where it is stressed, where you might have pressures that are a little bit lower or higher, as the case may be, than is the typical standard. And standard water pressures are between 40 and 80 psi. 40 psi is certainly on the low end of things, but normal pressures are in that range. And then, but also looking at flows, available flows as well, particularly in fire flow events, to make sure you can get enough water throughout the distribution system. And frankly, a lot of the old part of town, the water main is a little bit smaller. So you have a lot of 4-inch main there that really does restrict the flows and pressures in that area. And so there is a plan to replace that 4-inch main, and that's built in to the expenditures that we are anticipating over the next 20 plus years. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be an iterative process. It's going to take cumulative planning with streets and paving that needs to be done too. You want to look at this whole situation together and make sure that you're addressing all the needs, not just underground infrastructure at that time. But there will be some improvements as water main is replaced in the downtown area. And also we've identified some areas on the outskirts of the existing village that the development occurred. There was water main that was extended out there, but it hasn't been fully looped. And while the pressures are adequate for right now, there could be some redundancy and improvement made, and those have been analyzed and are planned for in the future too. So that's a very good question. That's the long answer. The other answer is it all depends on where you are and what you deem to be adequate water pressure. But we go based on industry standard, and we try to evaluate the system under different scenarios and to see where there may be some deficiencies and make recommendations for improvements there. And I would say on whole, the recommended improvements certainly should improve the water pressure throughout the village when completed.
Over time.
Over a period of time.
Correct.
Yes.
Awesome. If you are satisfied with that answer, we were happy to give it. If you are not satisfied with that answer, please email utilitymasterplan@hampshireil.org, and we can explain it in detail. We can get some information about where you live and look into why you may be experiencing that, what you would consider a low water pressure, if you will. I'm really happy that you're watching, and I'm really happy to have the question. And please, if anybody else is watching and has any questions or any comments, we're interested in hearing them.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna just take a step back here because I don't think I provided an explanation of how this process occurred and how we did the master planning. What were the mechanisms in place for it? This is not an EEI master plan, right? We didn't come in here and say this is what you need to do. This was an interactive plan, very closely working with staff and board throughout the process and understanding what you felt the needs were, listening to the residents as well and where there was questions and concerns and trying to address those. Now, we go through it in a pragmatic way where we're looking at the existing conditions and capacities of your infrastructure, where you have conditions that we feel are areas where are going to need improvement, modifications, replacements. We look at that as far as the remaining lifespan of that infrastructure and when that might occur and when replacements may be required. And we also look at the capacities as well. Hampshire continues to grow, and the existing infrastructure is not going to be adequate in some cases for the expansion that continues to happen. So, there's a phasing and implementation plan that is developed when we're looking at conditions and capacities. So we are looking at the existing, we're looking at the projected future flows, and when some of those triggers are going to occur for improvements that need to happen. We put costs to those proposed improvements along with the timeline, so we have an understanding of when you are going to need to generate the revenue in order to plug in those improvements. And then that goes into the rate study component of things, and we look at different scenarios where we are evaluating different rate structures, different ways of creating revenue. There was probably 10 or so scenarios.
There were a lot of options, and they're all available on our website. I don't mean to cut you off, but the utility master plan that he's referencing is all available on our website for viewing at any time. It's fairly in-depth. It
is. So there was a lot of options that were evaluated through that, and that's what was presented to the village board. We had a long Saturday morning workshop with the board to review everything together, get the input, and then they made the decision about the proposed rate moving forward. So that's a very high level view of how we go about doing the master plans. You look at your existing, you really evaluate closely what the existing conditions are, what the near and long term needs are going to be, both from infrastructure that's aging as well as infrastructure improvements and expansion that's going to need to happen. Again, as I mentioned earlier, there's a regulatory aspect of things that is driving some of the improvements as well. We take all that into account with a recommended capital improvement plan, as well as the maintenance and operations needs that have to continue to be met.
I would like to say that over our time here, we've kind of focused our energy on educating both the residents and our board when it comes to making any decision. And the reason that we do that is because we always like to have the information to be able to justify the why, right? And so we have an awesome staff here, really dedicated individual professionals that care so much about our community. Many of them live right here within our community and care about us and bleed purple, just like the rest of us do. The thing that we do is try to challenge staff or recommendations to try to understand the why. And so that's why it's taking us 3 years. So in the past, 3 years or so, we've updated our capital improvement plan. We've updated this utilities master plan to really have that finite data to really understand so that we can make the informed decision. One thing that you said is that you did a rate study, and we didn't touch on it, or maybe we did. I'm sorry, the two videos are running together. We look at surrounding communities.
Mm-hmm.
Surrounding communities are facing very similar things. I think you brought that up in the beginning of this video.
Yeah.
And so we try to be as close as we can to other communities, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want to be the highest. We don't want to be the lowest.
Right.
Again, it's not a matter of us making money on the water bills for any other purpose but to invest within our systems. That's it. And at the end of the day, when you turn on the water, there's an expectation that you're going to get it, and it's going to be safe and it's going to be clean. And again, the expectation is when you turn off the water that the water's going to drain and it's going to go out into the creek and be safer. As an example, we've heard over the years that my kids play in the creek. Well, if we're outflowing into the creek, we need to make sure that the water's safe. And so, unfortunately, the cost of business is going up. The cost of chemicals are going up. The cost of repairs are going up. The cost of, the construction projects are going up, and we're all facing it.
And you're not alone. Hampshire's not alone in this. Like I mentioned before, we're working on similar plans in other communities, and certainly aware of the struggles that everybody in the region is feeling, region and nationally. It's a common issue. Infrastructure grades, you can look them up. We're constantly getting bad marks throughout the country. It's a significant need overall, and that's there's a pragmatic view of the increase that's going to happen here and reevaluation over time, right? I think that's another thing that the board has discussed is this isn't going to be a constant increase in perpetuity. There's an obvious need for funding infrastructure improvements in the near future, and then we see where things are after a period of time, and then you reevaluate. And the hope and anticipation is, those increases are going to be sufficient for the future, and you're not going to have to significantly increase the rates again.
And so another question is really quickly is when does this take effect? It'll take effect in your July water bill. You'll notice the increase. That's when you'll notice it, because it went into effect as part of the budgeting process of the new budget year. So
yeah, just to add on, Hampshire was at the low end. We compared against 30 plus communities around here, a lot of very similar communities, your neighbors, some larger communities, some smaller, but Hampshire was at the very low end of the spectrum and had been for quite a long time as far as the water and sewer rates. And, it's just kind of caught up with you at this point for, the infrastructure that's continued to age, but not having the revenue in order to maintain it to this point.
And it's an unfortunate circumstance, but this is where we are. And I don't like it any more than anybody watching the video. I don't like it any more than the people that are going to be opening up their bills and go, what the heck? I mean, and it's just, it's going to cost more to water your grass. It's going to cost more to do laundry and the normal everyday tasks that we do. And it's unfortunate. And I am sorry that we had to come to this decision, but I am confident that if we didn't make this decision, that in the future we would be experiencing trouble. And, to this point, Hampshire hasn't been in the news for anything water related. And it's kind of like a badge of honor because you can watch the news on a weekly basis, it seems, and you can see other communities around us in our area, general region, or around the country that are having problems with delivering clear, safe drinking water to their communities. And I don't want to be in the news for that. The village doesn't. I mean, we take pride in what we do. We are happy that we are here to serve the community, and we take pride in what we do. And so we have to do the best that we can with the information that we have. And unfortunately, it's taken us 3 years to get the information, but I'm confident it's the right information, and that's how we were able to come to the decision.
It was well vetted. We'll say that it was a collaborative process, as I mentioned before. Staff was engaged, asking the right questions, really trying to take a targeted approach, not just spending money to spend money. There was a lot of questions and a lot of deliberation on all of the proposed improvements that need to happen with the infrastructure. And, that process is ongoing. And, but really what the obvious thing was that there just wasn't enough revenue generated. These funds are meant to be self-sufficient, as Mike stated earlier, and not reliant on outside sources of income. And you really weren't keeping much of a reserve, much of a balance in the accounts here to be able to fund unforeseen circumstances that might arise, as well as to plan improvements.
Or the high dollar ones, for that matter. I mean, we had enough money to maintain what we had or patch a water main break, of which I believe, and somebody's going to quote, I have it written down, but I have the wrong quote. I think we had 12 last year, I believe.
It's a pretty significant amount, right?
And that's impactful as well in its own right, because it always seems to happen when you're taking your kid to school or picking your kid up from school, and so, or, like we had last summer when you were right in the middle of a shower and we're out shutting the water off because it's flooding the street, and then people are upset with us because they go, well, why didn't you tell us? It's like, well, we try to communicate as much as we can. However, if it's a choice between flooding the street or flooding people's basements and that, or shutting, and getting people to know that we're going to shut the water off or shut the water off, we're going to shut the water off in those emergency type situations. So, again, we have a great staff. We have great partners with EEI. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we missed with this? I don't think so. I think we beat the horse to death twice.
Yeah, no, you're to be commended. The village is to be commended for being proactive, being transparent through this process, getting the information out there, allowing for questions to be asked. You've been very accommodating and creating these circumstances, and I've been honored to be part of it, to help the village. I've really enjoyed working with the village over the last 20 years. I feel personally vested in a lot of the infrastructure here because I've been part of it, and really care about this community and the success of it moving forward.
I appreciate your kind words. I'm going to let you get home to your family. I'm sorry it's a half hour or 38 minutes later than we had planned.
Yep, all good.
Apologies to Mrs. Dennison. And I appreciate you coming out tonight, talking to us, talking to our residents. Again, the thought process is if you weren't able to join us tonight, that this would be available on Facebook, so you'd be able to watch it later. Again, if you have any questions, visit our website. There's an FAQ page right on the homepage, and then there's an email address of utilitymasterplan@hampshireil.org with that you're able to email questions to, and we will do our best to answer, and then post it on the FAQ for others. So with that, I'm going to click this button that says end live video, and hopefully I do it the right way and my laptop doesn't start smoking. Anyway, have a good evening, everybody. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.